The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gleaming marble floor of the Meridian Grand Hotel as Jasmine Wilson pushed through the revolving doors. Her shoulders ached from the weight of her carry-on bag, and the 14-hour flight from Tokyo had left dark circles under her eyes. Still, there was something satisfying about coming home to Chicago, especially to visit the newest addition to her company's collection of luxury hotels. The lobby of the Meridian Grand was exactly as she had envisioned it when she'd approved the final designs 18 months ago: soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, plush velvet seating areas in deep blues and golds, the subtle scent of jasmine and sandalwood in the air, her personal touch, a signature scent she'd helped develop for all Horizon hospitality properties. Jasmine adjusted her simple black blazer over her travel-worn t-shirt and jeans. She hadn't bothered changing on the plane, knowing she would head straight to her suite for a shower and much-needed rest before tomorrow's board meeting. Her curly hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore only the barest hint of makeup after the long flight. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said an older woman standing next to her, also admiring the lobby. Jasmine smiled, unable to hide her pride. "It really is. They've done a wonderful job restoring the old building. I stayed here 20 years ago when it was still the Palmer House." The restoration was a challenge, Jasmine admitted, but worth every penny and headache. The woman gave her a curious look, perhaps wondering how Jasmine would know about the restoration costs, but then drifted away toward the bar. Jasmine made her way to the reception desk, rolling her carry-on behind her. 3 receptionists stood behind the gleaming marble counter, all dressed in the navy blue uniforms she had approved last quarter. 2 were helping other guests, but the third, a young man with neatly combed hair and a name tag reading Thomas, was free. He was focused on his computer screen, not looking up as she approached. "Good evening," Jasmine said, setting her purse on the counter. "I have a reservation for the presidential suite." Thomas looked up, his eyes quickly scanning her casual travel clothes, the faded university logo on her t-shirt, her simple gold hoop earrings. Something in his expression shifted, a barely perceptible tightening around his mouth. "Good evening, ma'am. Your name, please?" "Wilson." "Jasmine Wilson." Thomas tapped at his keyboard, his eyes on the screen. "I'm not seeing a reservation under that name." Jasmine frowned, pulling out her phone. "That's strange. I have the confirmation right here." She pulled up the email and turned the screen toward him. "Reservation, HHG 29845 Presidential Suite, 5-night stay." Thomas barely glanced at her phone. "I apologize, but it appears there was an error in our system. The presidential suite is currently occupied." Jasmine blinked, a knot forming in her stomach. She knew for a fact that the suite was vacant. She had personally reviewed the hotel's occupancy reports on the flight over. "There must be some mistake," she said, keeping her voice level. "I made this reservation months ago." "I'm sure if you check again—" "I've checked, ma'am," Thomas interrupted, his tone carrying a hint of impatience. "The system shows no reservation under your name, and the presidential suite is unavailable." Jasmine took a deep breath. She'd been in the hospitality business for 15 years. She knew computer glitches happened, but something about this interaction felt off. "Could you please check with your manager? I'm sure we can sort this out." At the front desk beside them, Jasmine noticed a white couple being checked in smoothly, the receptionist smiling and offering them a complimentary upgrade. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Thomas's smile tightened. "Our manager is currently unavailable. Perhaps you'd like to try the Holiday Inn 6 blocks south. They might have vacancies more." He paused, eyes flicking once more to her casual clothes. "Suited to your needs." The words hung in the air between them. Jasmine felt a familiar heat creeping up her neck. Not embarrassment, but the slow burn of indignation. She'd faced this before many times on her climb to the top. The assumptions. The dismissals. The subtle and not so subtle suggestions that she didn't belong in luxury spaces. "I don't want the Holiday Inn," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I want the room I reserved at this hotel. My company paid for that reservation months ago." Thomas's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I've told you there's no reservation. Now if you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call security." "A scene?" Jasmine looked around. She had kept her voice low. She had been nothing but polite. Yet somehow she was the one making a scene. "Please," she said, "just check the system again." The reservation was made through Horizon Hospitality Group's corporate account. At the mention of Horizon, something flickered across Thomas's face, uncertainty, perhaps. But it quickly disappeared. "Ma'am, I don't know what else to tell you. We have no rooms available at your price point." He emphasized the last two words in a way that made their meaning clear. Jasmine felt her patience wearing thin. She'd been dealing with this kind of treatment her whole life. The first in her family to go to college, the only black woman in her MBA program, and now, at 38, one of the youngest CEOs in the luxury hotel industry. Yet here she was, being denied a room in her own hotel. "I'd like to speak to whoever is in charge right now," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion and growing frustration. Thomas sighed dramatically, as if she was being unreasonable. "One moment." He picked up the phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away from her. "Yes, we have a situation at the front desk. A woman is insisting she has a reservation we can't locate." "Yes." "No, she's being quite persistent." While he spoke, Jasmine noticed a security guard eyeing her from across the lobby. She felt a flash of anger, quickly tamped down by years of practice. Getting angry would only reinforce the stereotypes Thomas seemed determined to project onto her. Instead, she pulled out her phone again and sent a quick text to her executive assistant, Priya, who was already at the hotel preparing for tomorrow's board meeting. "Having an issue at check-in. Could use your help in the lobby." Thomas hung up the phone. "Our duty manager is busy with a VIP guest right now. If you'd like to wait, you can have a seat over there." He gestured toward a distant corner of the lobby, far from the elegant seating areas where other guests relaxed with cocktails. "I'll wait right here, thank you," Jasmine said. She wasn't going to be relegated to the corner out of sight. The minutes ticked by. Jasmine watched as other guests were checked in efficiently, offered welcome drinks, given information about the hotel's amenities. No one else seemed to be having system errors or missing reservations. The security guard had moved closer now, standing about 15 feet away, watching her with forced casualness. Jasmine pretended not to notice, scrolling through emails on her phone while she waited. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, some disapproving, as if her mere presence was disrupting the refined atmosphere of the hotel. This was exactly why she had pushed so hard for diversity training when she took over as CEO 3 years ago. This was why she personally reviewed hiring practices across all 57 Horizon properties. This was why she'd insisted on blind resume screening and diverse interview panels. Yet clearly there was still work to be done. The sound of hurried footsteps caught her attention. Priya was crossing the lobby, her face a mix of concern and confusion. At 32, Priya had been Jasmine's right hand for nearly 5 years, following her from the regional director position to the corporate offices when Jasmine was named CEO. "There you are," Priya called out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Ms. Wilson, I've been looking everywhere for you. The team is waiting upstairs for your input on tomorrow's presentation." Thomas's head snapped up at the name, his eyes widening as they darted between Jasmine and Priya. "You know this woman?" he asked Priya, his voice suddenly uncertain. Priya stared at him in disbelief. "Know her? She's Jasmine Wilson, the CEO of Horizon Hospitality Group, your boss's boss's boss." The color drained from Thomas's face. Around them, conversations halted as hotel staff froze, recognition dawning as they connected the casually dressed woman at the counter with the executive whose portrait hung in the management offices. "There seems to be a problem with my reservation," Jasmine said to Priya, her voice calm but carrying in the sudden silence. "Apparently the presidential suite is unavailable, and there are no rooms at my price point." Priya's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Is that so?" She turned to Thomas, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "Interesting, considering Ms. Wilson's stay has been on the books for months, and I personally confirmed it yesterday." The security guard who had been hovering nearby suddenly found something fascinating to look at on the opposite side of the lobby. Other staff members were whispering to each other, shooting glances at the unfolding scene. From a door marked "Staff Only," a harried-looking man in a tailored suit emerged, making a beeline for the front desk. Jasmine recognized him from the hiring committee, Richard Patel, the hotel manager she had personally approved for the position. "Ms. Wilson," he exclaimed, genuine shock and dismay on his face. "I had no idea you'd arrived. We've been expecting you, of course. Your suite is ready and waiting." "Is it?" Jasmine asked quietly. "Your staff seems to think otherwise." Richard's eyes darted to Thomas, who looked like he wanted the marble floor to open up and swallow him whole. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, Richard said, shooting a look at Thomas that promised a serious conversation later. Thomas is new and he clearly didn't recognize you or understand the importance of your reservation. I see, Jasmine said. And does recognizing me or my importance change whether I deserve a room in this hotel? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unavoidable. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been judged, dismissed, or made to feel unwelcome based on appearance or assumptions. Richard, to his credit, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Of course not, Miss Wilson. Every guest deserves our full respect and attention. What happened here was inexcusable, regardless of who you are. Jasmine nodded, too tired from her journey and the confrontation to say more. The damage was done, but how she responded next would set the tone for her entire company. I'd like my room key. Please, she said simply. Richard himself processed her check-in, apologizing profusely while Thomas stood frozen beside him. As Jasmine accepted her keycard, she turned to Thomas, whose eyes were fixed on the counter. Thomas, she said, causing him to reluctantly meet her gaze. I'll see you at 7 tomorrow morning, my office. We have some things to discuss. Without waiting for a response, she followed Priya to the elevators, leaving behind a lobby buzzing with whispers and a front desk staff in disarray. Tomorrow would be time enough to address what had happened. Tonight she needed rest and time to think about how to turn this ugly incident into a moment of genuine change. Jasmine barely slept that night. The presidential suite of the Meridian Grand was everything she had designed it to be. Spacious, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. But her mind kept replaying the incident at the front desk. The dismissive look in Thomas's eyes, the security guard hovering nearby, the other guests checking in with ease while she stood there, being told there was no room for her. She sat at the window at 5 a.m., watching the city slowly come to life as she sipped her coffee. By the time the sun rose, she had made her decision about how to handle the situation. Priya arrived at 6:30, her arms full of folders and a worried expression on her face. The board members are asking about what happened last night, she said, setting down the materials for the day's meeting. Word travels fast. Mr. Chen called me directly. He's furious. Jasmine nodded. Harold Chen, the chairman of Horizon's board, had been her mentor for years. He would expect her to fire Thomas immediately and make an example of him. I've arranged for a meeting with Thomas at 7, followed by department heads at 8, Jasmine said. The board meeting is still on for 10. I'm going to need you to push back my other appointments. Priya looked at her curiously. What are you planning? Jasmine turned away from the window. Something different than what everyone expects. At precisely 7 a.m., Jasmine sat in the hotel's small executive office. She wore a crisp white suit, her armor for difficult days. Her hair was styled in a neat bun, her makeup flawless. If Thomas had trouble recognizing her authority in casual clothes, she would leave no room for doubt today. A soft knock came at the door. Come in, she called. Thomas entered, his face pale and his hands visibly shaking. He'd clearly had as little sleep as she had. Gone was the smug confidence from the night before, replaced by naked fear. Ms. Wilson, Jasmine held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Sit down, Thomas. He sank into the chair across from her, his eyes fixed on the desk between them. Do you know why I'm here in Chicago? She asked. Thomas swallowed hard. For the board meeting, ma'am? Yes, but specifically, I'm here to review the first quarter results of the Meridian Grand. This hotel's performance matters to me. Do you know why? He shook his head slightly. Because I fought for this property. The board thought renovating a historic hotel was too risky, too expensive. But I saw potential here that others didn't. She leaned forward. I believed in this place when others didn't. Just like I've spent my career believing in people when others wrote them off. Thomas finally looked up, confusion replacing some of the fear in his eyes. You're expecting me to fire you, Jasmine stated. His shoulders slumped. Yes, ma'am. That would be the easy thing to do. It would make the board happy. It would probably make a lot of the staff happy. It might even make me feel better for a moment, she paused. But it wouldn't solve the real problem. Thomas blinked, clearly not following. Tell me why you didn't give me a room last night, Jasmine said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. There was a system error, Thomas began, the rehearsed excuse falling flat even to his own ears. No, Jasmine interrupted. There was no system error. My reservation was in the system exactly as I said it was. I checked the logs this morning. You saw it. You chose to lie to me. I want to know why. Silence filled the room. Outside they could hear the distant sounds of the hotel coming to life. Staff greeting early risers, the clatter of breakfast service being prepared. Thomas started, then stopped. He took a deep breath. When you walked up, I made assumptions. You didn't look like what I expected. And what did you expect? Someone more... He struggled, clearly uncomfortable. More like the guests you didn't question? More like the people you automatically upgraded? Jasmine's voice remained calm, but her eyes were intense. You can say it, Thomas. I didn't look rich enough. I didn't look white. I didn't look like I belonged. Thomas's face flushed with shame. Yes, he admitted quietly. And I'm truly sorry. Jasmine studied him for a long moment. Do you know how many times I've heard I'm sorry after something like this happens? More times than I can count. Sorry doesn't change anything. I understand if you want me to resign, Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want your resignation, Jasmine replied. I want your commitment. His head snapped up, confusion written across his face. Firing you would be a quick fix that ignores the bigger issue, she explained. This isn't about you, Thomas. It's about a culture that lets someone like you feel comfortable making those assumptions in the first place. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she loved. When I was 23, fresh out of college with my first job in hotel management, I was denied entry to my own company holiday party. The security guard assumed I was trying to sneak in. She turned back to face him. The HR director fired that guard on the spot, and do you know what happened? Thomas shook his head. Nothing changed. The next month, a guest complained because they thought I was a housekeeper when I was actually the assistant manager. The month after that, a vendor refused to discuss pricing with me, insisting on speaking to someone in charge. She returned to her seat. Firing people doesn't fix the system, but people who recognize their mistakes and commit to doing better, they can change everything. Thomas stared at her, clearly struggling to process her words. Here's what's going to happen, Jasmine continued. In 30 minutes, I'm meeting with all department heads. You'll be there. I'm going to announce a complete overhaul of our training programs, hiring practices, and guest interaction protocols. And you, Thomas, are going to help implement these changes. Me? He asked, stunned. Yes, you. Because you now understand the problem in a way others might not. You're going to work with our diversity officer to develop new training modules. You're going to share your experience openly and honestly with every staff member and every Horizon property. And you're going to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else in any of our hotels. Thomas sat straighter, the fear in his eyes replaced by something new, understanding, perhaps even purpose. Why would you give me that chance? He asked. After what I did? Jasmine's expression softened slightly. Because someone once gave me a second chance when I made a terrible mistake. Because I believe people can grow. And because turning this ugly incident into meaningful change is more important than punishment. She pushed a folder across the desk. This contains my initial thoughts on the changes we need to make. Review it before the 8 o'clock meeting. Be prepared to take notes and contribute ideas. Thomas took the folder with shaking hands. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I won't let you down. This isn't about me, Thomas. It's about every person who walks through those doors downstairs. It's about creating a world where people aren't judged by their appearance or background. She checked her watch. You have 25 minutes. I suggest you use them wisely. After Thomas left, Priya slipped into the office. You're not firing him? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. Firing him would make a statement, Jasmine replied. Transforming him into an advocate for change will start a movement. Priya smiled slowly. Harold won't like it. He'll say you're being too soft. Harold didn't build this company by doing the expected thing, Jasmine countered, and neither did I. By 7:55, the hotel's conference room was filled with nervous department heads. They'd all heard about the incident the night before. They'd all been expecting a bloodbath. What they got instead was a vision. Jasmine stood at the head of the table, commanding the room without raising her voice. Thomas sat to her right, the surprise on the other managers' faces obvious when they realized he hadn't been fired. Last night, Jasmine began, I experienced firsthand what too many of our guests might be experiencing every day. I was judged, dismissed, and nearly removed from this hotel based solely on assumptions about who I was and where I belonged. The room was silent, the discomfort palpable. I could fire people. I could issue reprimands. I could pretend this was an isolated incident. She paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. But we all know it wasn't. This is about our culture, our training, our hiring, and our values. She nodded to Thomas, who stood nervously. Thomas is going to share his perspective on what happened last night, and then we're going to outline a new path forward, one that ensures every single person who walks through our doors is treated with the same respect and dignity, regardless of how they look, what they wear, or who we assume them to be. As Thomas began to speak, haltingly at first and then with growing conviction, Jasmine watched the faces around the table. There was shock, discomfort, recognition, and finally, what she had been hoping for, resolve. By the time the board meeting started at 10, Jasmine had a comprehensive plan to present. Not just a response to an incident, but a revolution in how Horizon Hospitality approached diversity, equity, and inclusion. Harold Chen frowned as she outlined her decision not to fire Thomas. "You're showing weakness," he argued. "The staff will think they can get away with anything." Jasmine smiled. "No, Harold. I'm showing strength. The kind that transforms enemies into allies and mistakes into opportunities." She pulled up the presentation she'd prepared during her sleepless night. "Gentlemen and ladies of the board, what happened to me last night was unacceptable, but it has given us an unprecedented opportunity to lead our industry in a new direction. Here's how we're going to do it." As she clicked to the first slide, she caught Thomas's eye through the glass wall of the conference room. He stood a little straighter, notebook in hand, ready to take his first steps on a new path, one that would ultimately change not just a hotel, but an entire company culture. The board meeting ran longer than expected. By the time Jasmine finished presenting her plan for company-wide changes, the afternoon sun was streaming through the windows of the conference room. Some board members had been skeptical, others outright resistant, but in the end, Harold Chen's support had tipped the scales in her favor. "You have 6 months," Harold had told her as the meeting adjourned. 6 months to show measurable results. "If this soft approach of yours doesn't work, we do it my way." Jasmine had simply nodded. She knew 6 months was tight, but she also knew she was right. Firing Thomas would have made headlines for a day. Transforming the company's approach to diversity and inclusion would make history. She found Thomas waiting outside the conference room, his earlier nervousness replaced by a quiet determination. He'd spent the morning with the hotel's staff, sharing his story and listening to theirs. It hadn't been comfortable for him or for them, but it had been necessary. "How did the board take it?" he asked as they walked toward her temporary office. "About as well as expected," Jasmine replied. "Some think I've lost my mind. Others see the potential. We have 6 months to prove this approach works. 6 months isn't much time." "No, it's not." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Are you up for this, Thomas? Really up for it? Because what I'm asking isn't easy. You'll face resistance. You'll have to be vulnerable in ways that most people never have to be in their professional lives." Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "When you first told me your plan this morning, I thought you were punishing me in some elaborate way," he admitted, "making me face what I did over and over again. And now? Now I understand this isn't about punishment. It's about growth." He met her eyes directly. "I'm ready, Ms. Wilson. I want to be part of the solution." Jasmine nodded, satisfied with his answer. "Then let's get to work." The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jasmine extended her stay in Chicago, working from the Meridian Grand as she oversaw the initial implementation of her plan. The first phase involved honest conversations, difficult, uncomfortable discussions about bias, assumptions, and the subtle ways discrimination manifested in daily interactions. Hotel staff gathered in groups, sharing experiences from both sides of the equation. Some had faced discrimination like Jasmine. Others, like Thomas, had to confront their own biases. "I never thought of myself as prejudiced," one front desk clerk admitted during a session, "but I realize now I treat people differently based on how they're dressed or how they talk. I never meant to hurt anyone, but I see now that intent doesn't matter as much as impact." These conversations weren't easy, but they were essential. Jasmine made sure every employee understood that the goal wasn't blame or shame. but awareness and change. The second phase focused on concrete actions. Jasmine worked with human resources to revamp hiring practices, ensuring diverse candidate pools for every position. She instituted blind resume reviews, removing names and other identifying information that might trigger unconscious bias. Most controversially, she launched what she called the mirror test, a program where individuals of different backgrounds would visit Horizon hotels as mystery guests, evaluating everything from their initial greeting to how quickly their requests were addressed. "This isn't about catching people doing something wrong," she explained to the nervous hotel managers across the company. "It's about identifying patterns we might not see otherwise." Thomas proved to be an unexpected asset. His willingness to share his own story, openly acknowledging his mistakes and the lessons he'd learned, resonated with staff in a way that no corporate training video ever could. He worked tirelessly, traveling to other Horizon properties, standing before groups of employees and telling them exactly what he had done and why it had been wrong. "I didn't see Ms. Wilson as a person," he would say. "I saw a category. I made assumptions based on her appearance that had nothing to do with who she actually was. And in doing so, I not only hurt her, I betrayed everything our company stands for." 4 weeks after the incident, Jasmine sat in her Chicago office reviewing the preliminary data from the mirror test. The results were sobering but not surprising. Guests who were Black, Hispanic, or Middle Eastern reported more instances of being questioned about their reservations. Women traveling alone were more likely to be assigned rooms near elevators without being asked their preference, a well-intentioned but paternalistic practice. Guests with disabilities often waited longer for assistance than able-bodied guests. "It's worse than I thought," Priya said, looking over the reports. "It's exactly as bad as I thought," Jasmine corrected her. "The difference is now we have data to prove it, and data to measure our progress against." She called Thomas into her office later that afternoon. His transformation over the past month had been remarkable. The nervous, defensive young man had been replaced by someone thoughtful and committed. "I need you to develop a training module based on these findings," Jasmine told him, sliding the report across her desk. "Something concrete that gives our staff specific actions to take, not just awareness to build." Thomas reviewed the data, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to address these patterns head-on," he said finally. "Role-playing scenarios where staff can practice checking their assumptions. Clear protocols for handling reservations that remove individual discretion, where bias might creep in, and accountability measures beyond just guest satisfaction surveys." Jasmine smiled slightly. "You've been giving this a lot of thought." "I think about it constantly," he admitted. "How close I came to throwing away my career because I couldn't see past my own assumptions. How many guests might have had experiences like yours but didn't have the power to do anything about it. That's why this matters so much," Jasmine said quietly. "Most people don't have the power I have. They get turned away, treated poorly, made to feel unwelcome, and they have no recourse except to never come back. And they tell others about their experience, and those people never come at all." Thomas nodded. "I understand that now. I really do." "Good, because I need you to head up the training team for this next phase. You'll be working directly with our diversity officer to roll out these new protocols across all Horizon properties." Thomas looked stunned. "You're promoting me? After what I did?" "I'm putting you in a position where your experience can make the greatest impact," Jasmine corrected him. "This isn't a reward, Thomas. It's a responsibility." The skepticism from other executives was immediate and predictable. During the next leadership call, the VP of Operations didn't bother hiding his disapproval. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're putting the guy who discriminated against you in charge of anti-discrimination training." "Have you lost your mind, Jasmine?" Jasmine remained calm. Who better to lead this effort than someone who has confronted his own biases directly? Thomas isn't teaching from a textbook. He's teaching from experience. "It sends the wrong message," another executive argued. "It looks like there are no consequences for discrimination in our company." "The consequence," Jasmine replied firmly, "is that Thomas has had to publicly confront his actions in a way most of us never have to do. He's had to rebuild his professional reputation from the ground up, and he'll spend the next phase of his career ensuring others don't make the same mistakes he did. That's a far more meaningful consequence than simply firing him would have been." Not everyone was convinced, but Jasmine didn't need everyone on board. She just needed results. By the 2-month mark, those results were beginning to show. The follow-up mirror test data revealed a 30% decrease in disparate treatment across Horizon properties. Guest satisfaction scores were trending upward, particularly among minority guests. Most significantly, employee engagement scores had improved dramatically as staff began to feel part of a meaningful change rather than simply following rules out of fear. Thomas's training modules were now being implemented across all 57 Horizon hotels. The centerpiece was a simulation experience that put employees in the shoes of guests from different backgrounds, allowing them to feel firsthand the impact of subtle biases and dismissive treatment. The key, Thomas explained during a training session Jasmine observed, is to move beyond guilt and into action. We all have biases. The question is what we do about them. Watching him work, Jasmine felt a sense of pride she hadn't expected. This was why she had taken the harder path, not just to address one incident, but to create lasting change that would outlive her time as CEO. After the session, Thomas approached her. The regional managers from the West Coast are pushing back on implementing the full program, he told her. They say their properties don't have these issues. Jasmine wasn't surprised. Resistance was part of the process. Send me their mirror test data, she said, and schedule a call for tomorrow. I'll handle it. As they walked out of the training room together, a housekeeper stopped them in the hallway. Ms. Wilson, she said shyly, I just wanted to thank you. My daughter works at the front desk of the Phoenix property. She said the new training changed how she sees her job, how she sees people. Jasmine smiled, touched by the unexpected feedback. Thank you for telling me that. These were the moments that mattered. The small signs that what they were doing was making a difference beyond metrics and data points. Later that evening, as Jasmine packed for her return to corporate headquarters, she received a text from Harold Chen. Board wants an update next week. Numbers looking good. Still think firing him would have been simpler. Jasmine smiled as she typed her reply. Simpler, yes. Better, no. See you next week. She looked out at the Chicago skyline from her suite. The same suite she had been told wasn't available to her that first night. In just 2 months, they had begun to shift the culture of an entire company. It wasn't perfect. There was still resistance, still work to be done. But they were moving in the right direction, and sometimes moving in the right direction was victory enough. 4 months into Jasmine's 6-month timeline, the quarterly reports landed on her desk with promising results. Guest satisfaction scores were up across all Horizon properties. Complaints about discriminatory treatment had decreased by nearly 60%. Employee retention had improved, especially among minority staff members who reported feeling more valued and respected in the workplace. But not everything was going smoothly. As Jasmine reviewed the reports in her office at corporate headquarters, Priya brought in the latest update from the Meridian Grand. We have a problem, Priya said, handing over a tablet with an email displayed. 3 of the executives from the Western region are pushing back hard against the next phase of the program. They're claiming it's too expensive and disruptive. Jasmine skimmed the email, noting the thinly veiled resistance. These weren't new arguments, she'd heard them all before. Too costly, too time-consuming. Not necessary for their unique market. And there's more, Priya continued. Someone leaked details about the incident with Thomas to the press. It's starting to gain traction on social media. This was unexpected. Jasmine had been transparent about the changes happening within the company, but she had kept the specific details of what happened that night private, not to protect herself or even Thomas, but to keep the focus on the solutions rather than the problem. How bad is it? She asked. Priya pulled up a news site on her tablet. The headline read, Luxury hotel chain promotes employee who discriminated against black CEO. They're spinning it like you rewarded bad behavior, Priya explained. The article mentions Thomas by name and says he got a promotion after refusing you a room. They're calling it failing upward, Jasmine sighed. The story was missing crucial context, but she wasn't entirely surprised. In a world hungry for outrage and quick justice, her approach was bound to be misunderstood by some. We need to get ahead of this, she said. Set up a video call with Thomas for this afternoon, and schedule a meeting with the PR team immediately. By the time Thomas joined the video call, Jasmine had already met with public relations and crafted a response strategy. Thomas looked tired, the strain of the past few months evident on his face. "I've seen the articles," he said without preamble. "I'm prepared to resign if that would help the company." Jasmine studied him through the screen. "Is that what you want to do?" He hesitated. "No, I believe in what we're doing. I've seen the difference it's making, but I don't want to be the reason it fails." "This was always a possibility," Jasmine replied. "People want simple narratives. Villains punished, heroes rewarded. What we're doing is more complicated than that." "So what do? We tell the whole story," Jasmine said. "Not just what happened that night, but everything that's happened since. The data, the changes, the results. We show them why this approach matters." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'm ready to do whatever you need me to do." The next morning, Jasmine sat down for an interview with a prominent business publication. She had chosen this outlet carefully. They were known for thoughtful, nuanced coverage rather than clickbait headlines. "Let me start by addressing the story that's been circulating," she began. "Yes, 4 months ago, I was denied a room in my own hotel by an employee who made assumptions based on my appearance. And yes, that employee now leads our diversity training program." The interviewer leaned forward. "Many would see that as rewarding bad behavior. What would you say to those critics?" "I'd say they're missing the bigger picture," Jasmine replied. "The easy response would have been to fire him, issue a press release about our zero-tolerance policy, and move on. It would have made headlines for a day and changed nothing." She pulled out a tablet and slid it across to the interviewer. "These are our company metrics from the past 4 months. Guest satisfaction up 22%. Discrimination complaints down 58%. Employee engagement improved across all demographics. These aren't just numbers, they represent real people having better experiences in our hotels." "And you attribute these changes to your decision not to fire this employee?" "I attribute them to our commitment to meaningful change rather than performative outrage," Jasmine corrected. "Thomas isn't leading our training program as a reward. He's doing it because his first-hand experience with confronting bias makes him uniquely qualified to help others do the same." The interviewer looked skeptical. "Some would say you're letting him off easy." Jasmine smiled slightly. "Have you ever had to stand in front of your colleagues and admit to a serious moral failing? Have you had to rebuild your professional reputation from scratch? There's nothing easy about the path Thomas has chosen." As the interview continued, Jasmine outlined the specific changes implemented across Horizon properties: the blind hiring practices, the mystery guest program, the revised training protocols. She spoke candidly about the resistance they'd faced and the work still to be done. "This isn't a quick fix," she explained. "It's a fundamental shift in how we operate. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Growth usually is." After the interview aired, the narrative began to shift. Other news outlets picked up the story, focusing on the innovative approach and measurable results rather than the initial controversy. Business schools requested case studies. Competitor hotel chains reached out to learn more about the training program. Not everyone was convinced, of course. Social media still buzzed with criticism from those who believed Thomas should have been fired. Some accused Jasmine of being too soft, others of using the incident for publicity. But the conversation had deepened beyond simple outrage. 6 days after the interview, Thomas called with unexpected news. The Western region executives who were pushing back against the program, they've changed their minds. They want to accelerate implementation at their properties. "What changed?" Jasmine asked, surprised by the sudden reversal. "Apparently, after your interview aired, they've been getting calls from major corporate clients asking if their hotels have implemented the Wilson Protocol yet." She could hear the smile in Thomas's voice. "Turns out, doing the right thing is good for business." This was the tipping point Jasmine had been hoping for, when external pressure aligned with internal values to create momentum for change. It wasn't just about avoiding bad publicity anymore. It was about being on the right side of an important conversation. The following week, Jasmine returned to the Meridian Grand for the 5-month mark of her program. The hotel felt different now, not just in policy but in atmosphere. Staff members greeted guests with genuine warmth regardless of appearance. The front desk team had been expanded to include people from diverse backgrounds. Small but meaningful touches had been added throughout the property. Artwork from local artists of color, menus that reflected Chicago's cultural diversity, staff name tags that included pronouns and languages spoken. As Jasmine, checked in, a process that went flawlessly this time. The general manager approached her with a thick folder. "These came in over the past month," he explained. "I thought you might want to see them." Inside were dozens of comment cards and emails from guests. A black family who wrote about feeling truly welcome for the first time in a luxury hotel. An elderly woman who appreciated being treated with respect rather than impatience. A non-binary guest who was addressed correctly throughout their stay. "This is what success looks like," Jasmine said softly, flipping through the messages. That evening, she met with Thomas and the hotel's leadership team to review progress and plan the final phase of implementation before her 6-month deadline. "We've come further than I expected," she admitted as they wrapped up the meeting, "but we can't get complacent. This work is never really finished." Thomas nodded in agreement. "The training programs are working, but we need to make sure they evolve. New biases emerge. New challenges arise. We need to stay vigilant." As the others filed out, Thomas lingered behind. "I never properly thanked you," he said once they were alone. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself that night. For giving me a chance to be better than my worst moment." Jasmine considered him thoughtfully. "5 months ago you judged me based on appearances. You couldn't see past your own assumptions to the person standing in front of you." Thomas looked down, the memory still clearly painful. "But I made a judgment about you too," Jasmine continued. "I saw someone who had made a terrible mistake, but who had the potential to turn that mistake into something meaningful. I'm glad I was right." As she walked back to her suite that night, the same suite she had nearly been denied, Jasmine reflected on how far they had come. The incident that could have ended in a firing and a press release had instead sparked a movement that was transforming not just Horizon Hospitality but the industry as a whole. Her phone buzzed with a message from Harold Chen. "Board meeting next week. 6-month deadline approaching. Numbers look good. Still think you should have fired him?" Jasmine smiled as she typed her reply. "Still think you should have trusted me." She could almost see Harold's grudging smile as he read her message. The board had been skeptical, but the results spoke for themselves. What had started as an ugly incident in a hotel lobby had become a case study in effective leadership and meaningful change. There was still work to be done, challenges to face, resistance to overcome. But looking out over the Chicago skyline, Jasmine felt something she hadn't expected to feel that first night. Hope. Not just for her company, but for the possibility that sometimes choosing the harder path could lead to places the easy path never would. 6 months to the day after Jasmine had been denied a room at the Meridian Grand, she stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, looking out at a sea of faces. The entire board of directors sat in the front row, Harold Chen among them, his expression impossible to read. Behind them were hotel managers from all 57 Horizon properties, flown in for this moment. Media representatives lined the back wall, notebooks and cameras ready. Jasmine took a deep breath. This was the culmination of half a year of hard work, difficult conversations, and relentless commitment to change. Today, she would present the final results of what the industry, now called the Wilson Protocol, the comprehensive approach to diversity and inclusion that had begun with a painful incident and grown into something much bigger. Thomas stood off to the side of the stage, dressed in a tailored suit, looking far more confident than the nervous young man who had sat across from her 6 months ago. He caught her eye and gave a small nod of encouragement. 6 months ago, Jasmine began, her voice steady and clear, I stood in the lobby of this hotel and was told there was no room for me. Today I stand before you to share how that moment has transformed not just a single hotel, but an entire company culture. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a simple graph showing the key metrics they had been tracking. The numbers tell part of the story, she continued. Guest satisfaction up 27% across all demographics, with the largest gains among minority guests. Employee retention improved by 32%, saving us millions in hiring and training costs. Bookings up 18%, driven in part by corporate clients specifically seeking out our properties because of our inclusive practices. Harold Chen leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the financial figures. Jasmine knew this was what would matter most to him and many of the other board members, the business case for the changes they had made. But numbers only tell part of the story, she said, clicking to the next slide. The real impact is best understood through experiences. The screen showed photographs of guests and employees, alongside quotes from their feedback. A family celebrating their anniversary, who wrote about feeling truly welcome for the first time in a luxury hotel. A front desk clerk who described how the new training had changed not just how she did her job, but how she saw the world. A corporate client who had moved their annual conference to a Horizon property, specifically because of their commitment to inclusion. What began as a response to discrimination has become a competitive advantage, Jasmine explained. In an industry built on hospitality, we have redefined what it means to make everyone feel welcome. She outlined the specific programs they had implemented, the revised hiring practices, the training modules, the mystery guest program. She shared the challenges they had faced and how they had overcome them. And then she did something unexpected. But to truly understand the impact of these changes, I'd like to invite someone else to speak. She gestured toward the side of the stage. Thomas Reed, who now serves as our Director of Inclusive Guest Experience, has a unique perspective on this journey. A murmur ran through the audience as Thomas walked to the podium. Everyone in the room knew who he was, the employee who had denied the CEO a room. Many had expected him to be fired. Instead, here he was, taking the stage at this pivotal moment. 6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake, Thomas began, his voice slightly shaky but gaining strength as he continued. I looked at a guest in front of me and made assumptions based on her appearance. I couldn't see past my own biases to recognize not just our CEO, but a human being deserving of respect. The room was completely silent. Every person hanging on his words. I expected to lose my job that day, he continued. Instead, Ms. Wilson offered me something much harder, the chance to confront my biases, to learn from my mistake, and to help others do the same. Thomas shared his experience over the past 6 months, the uncomfortable conversations, the resistance he had faced, the moments of breakthrough when staff members began to see their own blind spots. He spoke candidly about the personal growth he had experienced and the responsibility he felt to continue this work. This isn't about political correctness or checking boxes, he said, toward the end of his remarks. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, beyond our assumptions and preconceptions. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels valued, not despite their differences, but because of the unique perspectives those differences bring. As Thomas returned to his seat, the applause was genuine and sustained. Jasmine could see the impact of his words on the faces in the audience. Thoughtful, moved, inspired. She returned to the podium for her closing remarks. 6 months ago, Harold Chen, our board chairman, gave me a deadline. He said if our approach didn't show results in 6 months, we would do things his way. She smiled slightly. Harold has never been known for his patience. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. Harold himself gave a grudging smile. Today, I'm proud to report that we have not only met but exceeded every target we set. Jasmine clicked to her final slide, a photograph of the entire staff of the Meridian Grand, standing together in the lobby where her journey had begun. This is what success looks like. Not just policies on paper, but people working together with new awareness and commitment to seeing each other fully. After the presentation, as attendees mingled during the reception, Harold made his way to Jasmine's side. You proved me wrong, he said without preamble. Never one to waste words. I thought you were being naive. I thought the only way to handle discrimination was with zero tolerance and immediate termination. And now? Jasmine asked. Harold glanced across the room to where Thomas was speaking with a group of hotel managers, all of them engaged and attentive. Now I think you might have been onto something, he admitted. The numbers speak for themselves. And that young man, he shook his head slightly. You saw something in him that I would have missed completely. That's rather the point of this whole exercise, isn't it? Jasmine said with a small smile. Seeing beyond our first impressions, Harold nodded thoughtfully. The board is very pleased with the results. There's already talk of expanding these initiatives beyond the hotels, to our resorts, our cruise line, maybe even our residential properties. That was the plan all along, Jasmine replied. This was never just about fixing one incident or one hotel. It was about changing how we do business top to bottom. As Harold moved away to speak with other board members, Priya appeared at Jasmine's side. Congratulations, she said warmly. I just got word that the Hospitality Leadership Forum wants you to deliver the keynote at their annual conference. They're calling the Wilson Protocol the most significant advancement in hospitality culture in a decade. Jasmine took a sip of her champagne, savoring the moment. Not bad for 6 months' work. What's next? Priya asked. Now that you've proven your approach works? Before Jasmine could answer, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of people had just arrived, individuals of various ages, backgrounds, and appearances. Jasmine recognized them immediately as some of the mystery guests who had helped test and refine their new protocols. "Ms. Wilson," called out one of them, an older woman using a cane. "We came to celebrate with you." Jasmine excused herself and went to greet them, warmly embracing each person. These weren't just test subjects in a corporate experiment. They had become partners in creating meaningful change. As the evening continued, Jasmine found a quiet moment to slip away from the celebration. She made her way to the lobby, standing in the exact spot where she had stood 6 months ago, tired from her flight, asking for a room that was rightfully hers. Thomas found her there a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Everything's perfect," she assured him. "I just wanted to take a moment to remember where this all began." They stood in silence for a moment, watching guests come and go. Front desk staff greeting each person with genuine warmth regardless of how they were dressed or what they looked like. "We've come a long way," Thomas observed. "We have," Jasmine agreed. "But this is just the beginning." She thought about Harold's question about what came next. The truth was, the work they had started would never really be finished. Biases ran deep. New challenges would always emerge. But they had created a framework for addressing these issues honestly and effectively. "You know," Thomas said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that night a lot recently, about how differently things could have gone." "If I had just fired you, you mean?" He nodded. That would have been the expected response. "The easy path?" "I've never been particularly interested in easy paths," Jasmine replied with a smile. "They rarely lead anywhere worth going." As they walked back to the ballroom together, Jasmine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The incident that could have ended in bitterness and division had instead sparked a movement that was changing not just their company, but potentially their entire industry. And it had all started right here, with a woman being told she didn't belong, and refusing to accept that answer. 1 year later, the Meridian Grand Hotel won the prestigious Global Hospitality Award for Excellence in Guest Experience. The judges specifically cited the hotel's innovative approach to inclusive service as setting a new standard for the industry. Jasmine and Thomas accepted the award together, standing side by side on stage, a powerful symbol of what can happen when people are given the chance to be better than their worst moments, and when leaders have the courage to choose transformation over punishment. What had begun as an ugly incident had become a turning point, not just for a hotel or a company, but for an industry ready for change. And it all started because one woman refused to be denied a room in her own hotel.